I'm Dina Brown, certified financial planner professional and certified divorce financial analyst and founder of Bag Lady Divorce, Get Your Money. So we have a very special guest today, Bill Sharp of Sharp Mortgages. And if you are currently going through divorce or recently divorced and thinking about buying your own home, you especially want to pay attention to this video today. Bill, thank you so much for being on today. How are you?
Good. My pleasure. Anytime.
Great. Well, thank you. So Bill, you've been in the mortgage business for about 28 years, so you've pretty much seen it all.
Pretty much. I think so. Every once in a while I get surprised, but I think I've seen just about everything.
So it seems like the market right now is super hot, and I know you are super busy. It took me a long time to get you nailed down to do this interview today. But for our ladies out there that are currently going through divorce or they are recently divorced, what type of advice would you give them if they are thinking about qualifying for a mortgage and buying their own home?
Okay. So yes, there's a lot of really good subject matters in that. First thing that I would tell you, if you're going to contemplate going to buy something and depending on your price range, the market is incredibly hot as we speak here in February 2021. The inventory is very low, so you have a lot of buyers in the market and not as many homes available, and so it kind of creates a buying frenzy. And quite often I'm hearing where, there's 20 offers in a day on a house and there's a decision
Wow.
that's made, and a lot of times the buyers aren't getting them. So one thing that I would tell you that I tell my agents to do is do an escalatory clause. And what that is that you make an offer and it says, I'm willing to pay you $200,000 for the house. However, if you get another offer, I'm willing to pay up to $10,000 more than what I'm offering in $1,000 increments if you get another offer that is equal to mine. That way you kind of become the leader every time. So that's a
What
little
is that
strategy
clause called again, Bill?
called an escalatory clause.
Escalatory clause, and your realtor will know what that is.
If they're good, they will know what
Okay.
that is. If they're not, they may need to get educated, because that is a really popular tool that's being used by the really experienced agents to kind of put their offer ahead of everybody else.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that there could be a lot of variables. Could be somebody made cash and you wanted to get financing and they don't want to go through the financing. So there's a lot of variables that go into all of that. But that's the first thing that I would think would be really important in today's market. It might not be that way in 6 months, but it is today.
So don't you need to be pre-approved though to even get to the point where you're putting an offer on a home and using that clause? Don't you need a
Yes,
pre-approval for mortgage?
you do. And
Okay.
so in this market, the seller wants to know when an offer is coming in that you're qualified and able to make this transaction happen. So what they're going to want you to do is to come to a professional like me and give all of your information over so that we can essentially run the credit, review your income and expenses, and determine that you qualify for the property that you're entering an offer on. And most realtors will not even entertain an offer unless you have that, or you have a proof of funds letter that says I've got enough cash to pay for this transaction.
Okay.
So most people want to get financing if they can, and it would kind of be foolish not to with rates phenomenally good right now. It would kind of be a wise move to, with what you do for a living, you probably would tell your clients, if you can go borrow money, at 3% and I can make you 9% on your money, why would you not finance a house?
I'm not saying that.
You're not. Okay. Well, having said that,
I'm not allowed to say that.
Okay. Well,
but I get the gist of it. Money right now, to borrow money, it's cheap. Money is cheap right now. So if you can get a mortgage at 3%, why not really think about doing that?
Take advantage of it, right? And then to that end, what I will do to get you pre-qualified is I'll take an application from you. I'll gather all of your income, your assets, your liabilities. And when you call me, if it were me, we would want, or whoever, we would want to get all of that information as detail oriented as we can. And we're looking for a history of at least 2 years on everything that's been going on. And then as it relates to income, that's a very big factor when you're going through a divorce. Is, a lot of times the women, they sometimes want to buy it while they're in the divorce, and that becomes an issue. for a lot of reasons. And the biggest being that when you're in a divorce, you're in a lawsuit. And when you're in a lawsuit in a divorce, we don't know from a lending perspective what your obligation is going to be or what your benefit's going to be. And so we really have to wait until it's completed to know where you are.
Okay,
And
so if you're currently in a divorce, you're probably not going to qualify for a mortgage.
Yeah,
You
it
need to
would
wait
be
till after the divorce is finalized.
you would need to wait until after
Gotcha.
if you want to get a mortgage loan. And then, strategically speaking, and I'm not a lawyer, there'd be other logistical issues that you'd want to be concerned about buying a house in a divorce. But from a mortgage perspective, yeah, it's probably not going to happen if financing.
Got it.
So then assuming that you're divorced, now we're going to start to look at your income. And if you're newly divorced and all of your income is going to be coming from your alimony and your child support, they're going to want to see that there is a likelihood that the husband is going to pay it and that it's going to continue. And so we're going to look for, a history of that and try to make sure that you're going to be able to receive it and keep getting it. Income that you use, you generally want to make sure that it's going to be in continuance for at least 3 years. And if it's not, that can be a problem. And so, if you have a child who's getting ready to turn 18 and they're 17, you're not going to be able to use child support to qualify because that's getting ready to end and we don't have that consistency. So that is a general issue that we need to pay attention to. I like to see, personally speaking, I like to see a 12-month history of making sure that they've been receiving the alimony, that they're getting the child support, because when you go out and you buy a house and you get a mortgage, you're responsible for this payment. And depending on the ex-husband, sometimes they pay, sometimes they don't, depends on the circumstances. And I'd like to think that there's a lot of really good guys out there, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
So kind of need to be careful and make sure you know what you're doing.
Right. Right.
And then assets are a critical factor too. I'm going to want to know how much money that you have, what price range that you want to buy within, what your obligations are on a monthly basis, your car payments, your note payments, your student loan payments. And then we'll take into consideration, the amount of money that you're putting down, the purchase price, your income, your liabilities, and then we'll do the math.
So how much does someone need to put down to buy a home?
Depending on how much your loan amount is and what you're buying will depend on that. So if you're going to do an FHA loan, you're not going to get as much of a loan amount as you would if you did a conforming loan. So if we have a higher net worth, buyer, and a woman is going to go out and maybe buy something that's a nicer home. If she buys something and her loan amount is under $530,000, for example, she would be in a conforming range. And if she's doing that, I can finance 95% of that purchase price as long as my loan amount is in that category.
So if she's buying a $500,000 home, she would need 5% of $500,000. So she would need $25,000 to put down.
Yes, plus closing costs and prepaid, which generally run 3 to 5% of your loan amount.
So that's another 25,000 for a total of like 50,000.
Roughly.
So you got 5% down on a $500,000 home. That's 25,000 plus the prepaids, which could be another 5%, which would be another 25,000, which is $50,000.
Yeah, that probably would be a little bit high on closing costs, somewhere between 3 and 5. But that way you would know that you're, a lot of times, one thing I've learned from doing this 31 years now is that people do a really good job of living to the maximum of what they afford. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
I don't like people drain the bank account and have nothing left over when they get done buying their house, but
no emergency funds. What if the air conditioner breaks? How are you going to get it fixed?
Right.
Yep. Or the roof leaks. How are you going to get a new roof?
Exactly. And it's amazing to me. Sometimes I wonder how the people are even going to pay a mover to move into the house because they don't have any money. They don't have any money when I get done.
Oh my gosh.
To each his own. Hopefully, you're being wise, and obviously maybe they're using your services and they're trying to make sure that, financially they're where they need to be and that they've got their ducks in a row to be able to manage their lifestyle.
Right. So just because, sorry to cut you off, Bill, but just because somebody qualifies for a mortgage doesn't necessarily mean they can really afford it. Would that be
Yeah.
fair to say?
Well, let me say that we wouldn't lend money if they couldn't afford it. But what that might mean is that I might qualify you for the maximum mortgage, but then you're never going to take a trip to Alaska. You're probably never going to be able to go get a car and afford
I'm
it.
going to be
You know,
house poor
yeah,
because all my cash flow and all my wealth is going to be going towards paying my mortgage and my house expenses.
right. And so the
Gotcha.
general rule of thumb is that whatever your gross income is, we want your total obligations, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, all of your other payments. We don't want that number to exceed 43% of your gross income. So
43%
yeah.
of
So if you
gross.
have, yeah. So, you know, just to make the math simple, if you could afford $1,000 mortgage payment and you had a $200 car payment, the only thing you could qualify for with a 43 debt ratio would be 43% of, let's say that it was 43% and you take your car payment away, whatever that difference is that's left over, the 43%, that's what you have for your mortgage only. And then you can kind of do the math on that to see how much that might be. But
And then what's left over to pay for all of the other things you have to pay for just to live your life.
right, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
so we always do it. The other thing too, that a lot of people make the mistake on is we calculate it off of the gross income, not the net income. So if you
Before
make 10,
taxes.
yeah, so if you make 10,000, I'm using that for my 43%. So we've got a maximum, if you make 10,000 a month, I've got 4,300 to work with. And then from the 4,300, the car payment comes out and all of the other things that I have to account. And that doesn't include your food. It doesn't include your electricity. It doesn't include your auto insurance payment. Like all of those things are things you really have to pay for that a lot of people aren't thinking about. So,
Oh, so you take your gross before taxes, then you take out the 43%, and then you reduce that amount by all of your other fixed obligations, like your car payment, your, let's say, kids' tuition payments, insurances, all those, then all those come out of the 43% too. Is that
so
how it
yeah,
works?
yeah, for the mortgage payment debt ratio calculation, we only really look at loan payments, credit card payments, student loan
Credit
payments,
cards.
things like that. Things like
Okay.
electricity, insurances on your
Stuff you
car.
see on your credit report. So you take out the
Exactly.
stuff you see on your credit report, whatever those fixed monthly payments are, or even credit card payments, which are not fixed monthly payments, but they are an obligation. You take that out of the 43%.
That's right.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
the other thing too, you know, another thing that I see all the time that I think is really wise to advise all the women about is that when you're getting a mortgage, you know, you and your husband or your spouse may have accumulated a lot of debts that you may or may not remember that you're on. So one of the things you need to look at, which I always tell people, is go to annualcreditreport.com and get a free copy of your credit report from 3 credit bureaus.
Sure.
It won't affect your credit score, but then you can take a look and see what's on there.
Yeah.
You know, for example, it's not uncommon for me to see a credit card or a payment that the ex or the soon to be ex spouse used the wife with him to go and obtain credit. And when you're doing all of your factoring in of your divorce and what's going to happen and who's going to pay for what, you really need to know what those items are. And then when you do your decrees, a lot of it's amazing sometimes the things that I see, but you want to be really specific. You can't say in your divorce decree that the husband is going to take the visa. Well, you need to indicate like the last 4 or 5 numbers of the visa, because you might have 5 visas. And when I'm doing my
You need to be
calculation, which
specific.
one isn't? Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
something that I see from time to time.
And that has to be done, that should be done before the finalizing of the divorce, is pulling the credit report and seeing what's in your name, and then negotiating in divorce what your soon-to-be ex-spouse should be paying off or what your obligations are, because that could affect whether or not you get a mortgage after the divorce.
That's right. You could be on. a note obligation, maybe for his business that you don't remember that
Yeah.
you signed one. You know, there's all kinds of things that can come up that you're not thinking of when you're going through this
Right.
process.
Yep.
Stressful. And, you know, when it comes to me, I'm going to want to see if you're self-employed. These are some of the things that I would think you would want to talk about is, you know, if you're self-employed, I have to have a 2-year tax return history to get the best loan for you. And then I'll discover a lot there. And usually people don't make as much as they think they make when I look at the tax returns. If you're an employee, I want to see the 30-day pay stubs and the W-2s for the last 2 years. And that's what I'm going to kind of pay attention to what's going on in the borrower's life. And so I strongly encourage people when they are in the process, even, and they know they want to do something, reach out and say, hey, this is what I have going on. What does it look like for me? And based on the projections, I can tell you what I think you're going to do, when you can do it, all of that. It's really important.
So before you get a pre-approval, so you can start getting all your ducks in a row and start planning and getting your credit cleaned up and your income right and your tax returns and getting advice from an expert like you on planning to get a mortgage. But you really shouldn't apply for the pre-approval till after the divorce is finalized. Then that's when you can start moving forward and seeing if you would pre-approve, because again, you've got to qualify, which is what you had mentioned earlier.
That's right. So I would do everything except for run your credit and kind of evaluate, help you figure out where you are, because the credit is only good for 90 to 120 days. And we don't want to run it more than we need to. So we just figure things out, evaluate things, help you make some decisions. And then when you get ready, you kind of know where you are, where you're headed. And then once you get your divorce decree, you want to go buy, we then, you know, initiate that plan that we've put together to, you know, help you get where you want to be. Because most women, you know, they want to go buy another house and be into another home. They've probably been living in one and they're used to that and they don't want to change their lifestyle. And so we want to try to help them as much we can to be as comfortable as they can with the transition that they're going through.
And I can say that your typical mortgage company, at least from my experience, is not going to give you that hand-holding and kind of walk you through where you can actually talk to someone, a human being, and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Can you help me out and help me plan for this? And for someone in your position to say, sure, I'm happy to help. These are all the things you need to do, and help get them set up for later success. So when they do want to get that pre-approval, they've already been talking to someone like you, and makes the process a lot easier.
Yeah, and another thing that I might be able to spot that you might not even be thinking about, that is very critical to this whole discussion, is, let's just say that there's a marital home and husband and wife are divorcing, but one spouse is going to maintain the house and they're both obligated on the payment. You know, there's some things we need to be thinking about there, because if one of them's going to live there and the other one's not, and then they're going to get a divorce, okay, well, we've got a debt. And when you sign a note on a mortgage, I don't care what the divorce decree says. If the husband doesn't make the payment and he's living there, it is going to affect your credit when you go to get your house. So I see that all.
No.
Yeah.
So if we have a mortgage, so if there's a mortgage, husband and wife, and the mortgage stays as a joint mortgage, and then that would count against the person who's not living there, because it's an obligation.
That's exactly right.
It's good to know. How would somebody, let's say they don't want the marital home and they want to just start over again. How would they do that with the mortgage being in joint name? Do they have to so does the other person have to refinance it to get it into their name alone, to get the other person off the hook?
Yeah, it is my advice that they would do that, because, and then be very specific, because a lot of times, I just had one borrower that came in here in the last couple of months, and she had a duty and an obligation to refinance this property and get the ex-spouse off of the loan within like 12 months. But she didn't qualify. So now
Yeah.
what is she, you know what I mean? Like, that's a really big issue. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to be really careful about all of that, because you could make an obligation that you could never fulfill to the other side. And then it becomes a legal problem that it might end up back in court with your ex trying to figure out, what are we going to do here? And it might be that the property is ordered to be sold. Like, there's all kinds of things that could happen.
Yeah.
But yes, my advice would be, if you're on a joint obligation that is real estate related, the other spouse should refinance it and should do it within a certain period of time. In my opinion, it should be as soon as possible,
Okay.
because the longer that goes on, you don't know whether he's going to lose his job, whether he's going to have other obligations that would prevent him from qualifying. There's all kinds of things that could come up.
Right. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. There's just
You
so
have-
much that goes into borrowing money. And unless you're really paying attention and, kind of got your eye on the ball, which a lot of times the husband is the one that's been in charge of the finances. So the woman is not in tune as much as they should be, maybe. So it's a good time to get caught up and figure out where you are, what's going on, and, get educated and then get situated.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why we do these videos, to get everybody educated. So is there any other advice you want to give before we close up the video?
Yeah. One last thing that I would say that kind of goes along with what I was talking about is Florida is not a legal separation state. So a lot of times people, again, are going to come to me and they're going to say, well, I'm not divorced, but we're separated and I want to go buy a house. Okay, well, you can go do that. But just remember, if it's going to be your primary residence, your spouse that you're not living with, that is your husband, he is going to have to come and sign the mortgage at the time of closing. And people don't think about that. And then they find out a lot of times at the very end of the equation, and then it becomes very uncomfortable because they don't want him to know what they're doing.
Yeah, and what if he says, no, I'm not going to sign it because we're in a divorce and I don't like you right now, so I'm not going to help you. So
yeah, and we're not even, maybe we're not even in a divorce. We're just not living together, and I'm not going to help you do that. That would be a major problem. So that's part of why when you come to a professional, you're going to get these kind of advices if you're speaking with the right professional that's been around, that is knowledgeable about the different things that relate to the situation that you could be in. And that's where we'll kind of, get right to the chase and kind of help you with your thought processes.
Awesome. Well, Bill, this was so helpful. I've learned a ton. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
The best way is you can go to my website, which is www.sharp, S-H-A-R-P, mortgages with an S, mortgages.com. And on there, I have my contact information, my email, my office number is 997-1093. And
area code 904.
904. And my email is bill@sharpmortgages.com. Be happy to help you. There's no charge to get on the phone and talk to you and figure out what's going on and see how I can help you. It's just my job. It's what it is that I do. If I close a loan, I'll get paid. I'm not worried about it. So any way that I can help anyone, please call me. I'd be glad to help you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that generous offer. And definitely for those that are thinking about getting a mortgage, buying a home, even if you're not going through divorce, definitely give Bill a call. He's got a plethora of information that, again, I've learned a lot today. So thank you so much for being on. And we'll post your website to the video. And again, Dina Brown, if anybody needs my assistance with anything, 904-217-6377. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.